welcome to the Living Stones podcast. Today we're going to be talking about 6 red flags that a church is not emotionally safe. I'm joined by Cassie. Hi, Cassie.
Hello.
Thanks for being with us. Do you want
Absolutely.
to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I am Cassie Wimmer. I am a therapist, a trauma therapist specifically, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Why is church hurt often harder to heal from than other types of trauma? Particularly whenever it comes to trusting authority again.
Yeah, so I think that church hurt is especially difficult because you've got an entire community. So instead of having to get rid of one person in your life, you might lose your entire community. Also, oftentimes our idea of authority and the authorities in our lives are closely tied in our minds to what our beliefs are about God. And so if we have an abusive pastor or an abusive leader in the church, we can start to see God with those same types of negative characteristics. So then that throws us into spiritual difficulties that we have to sort through and all kinds of things.
As a therapist, what are the primary emotional symptoms that you see in people that are leaving a toxic church environment?
I would say confusion. I think people are really confused coming away from that. The environment was supposed to be healthy and life-giving, and they found it to be opposite. And sometimes there's feelings of, is it my fault? What did I do wrong? Should I have done something differently or better? So some guilt as well.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into the 6 red flags.
Yeah.
So flag number 1, leadership style is controlling or unapproachable. So how do we distinguish between strong pastoral leadership and a controlling, narcissistic, or unapproachable pastor?
Yeah, I would say that has to do with the leader's motives. So strong pastoral leadership is going to be about the people.
Yeah.
It's not going to be about the leader or the pastor. So a red flag for narcissism is if everything that somebody in leadership is doing in a church turns the attention back to them and how good they are. So if it's outward focused, you're probably safe. If it's focused on one person or a couple of people, that could be a red flag.
Yeah, so maybe if it's about the pastor, not exactly the church body, but exactly what the pastor is doing to benefit the church.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great example.
Yeah. Flag number 2 is loyalty testing. So if I feel like my belonging depends on how much I serve or give, rather than just being a member of the community. How is that a sign of an unhealthy culture?
Yeah, so if we think biblically, when the church was first built, it wasn't built on membership. People didn't need to perform a certain way or do certain acts of service to be a part of the church. It was about community and about being together. And so when church becomes about the services you bring, it's no longer about the people, and it becomes transactional. And transactional relationships don't lead to the type of depth of relationship that we want to get out of a church community.
I would say a lot of that has to do with your motivation, where your heart is coming from. I mean, the Bible tells us that when we give, do it from a joyful heart. So maybe if someone is giving or serving because they felt guilted into it, not because they're doing it to serve the Lord, but because they're trying to maybe earn their belonging in the church.
Yeah.
That could be a huge red flag.
Absolutely. That sounds like a big red flag. So paying attention to our own motives.
Yeah.
And if we're serving out of fear or losing community, that's not a good thing.
Yeah. Would you say that would be put on us by the church, or do you think maybe that's self-inflicted or both?
Yeah, and this is a tricky red flag because it could be self-inflicted. It could be that somebody has a pattern of over-serving in order to be, in order to belong. So it would take intentionality to discover if it was an internal thing or something that was being put on one by the church.
Yeah. Absolutely. Flag number 3, shame-based teaching. What does a shame-based culture sound like from the pulpit? How does it differ from a healthy conviction?
I once heard somebody say that healthy conviction is exciting to us in some way. It's an invitation to change for the better. So anytime from the pulpit there are words that make us feel ashamed or condemned, anytime that it's about that we are bad, that can be a red flag.
The 4th flag, encouraging unhealthy boundaries. So how do you spot a church that encourages isolation from family or friends who are not part of the congregation? And why is that dangerous?
I would say, even as a therapist, I am almost never going to, and maybe never going to, encourage somebody to cut off. Not because cut off is always bad. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's absolutely necessary,
Yeah.
but because it's not my job to tell somebody that. That's something that's a very personal decision, cut off, and needs to come from within. So if I, as a therapist, am not even going to say that to somebody, a church shouldn't be saying that to somebody. A church should be a place that provides enough love and care that people can cut off or minimize negative relationships outside of the church, but it should never be a requirement.
So why would it be dangerous to be part of a church that cuts you off from friends or family?
Yeah. I would say it's because you no longer have any external influences, and it makes you susceptible to the beliefs and ideas of the church. And if those are negative or unhealthy, you're in a place where your needs won't get met anymore unless you start believing what they say and acting the ways they want you to act.
I would think about how uncomfortable you would feel about a non-believing friend or family member attending church with you. There's always going to be some uncomfort with that, but how uncomfortable do you feel with having them step into that space?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's a good indicator of a red flag as well. If you're uncomfortable bringing somebody from the outside into this world, then maybe it's a good time to take a look at what's going on in that world.
Yeah. Flag number 5, over-spiritualizing mental health difficulties. So if a church tells you to pray harder instead of addressing genuine hurt, how should you respond?
First of all, this one just makes me angry because I've heard this so many times where clients come in and they say, well, I was just told to pray harder. And it really fosters a belief in people that there's something wrong with their faith. That if they just were more faithful, if they just believed better, that somehow they would be better.
Yeah.
And it's just not true.
Yeah, would you say that to someone with a broken arm? It's always the example that I'll hear. Would you say to someone with a broken arm to pray a bit more?
You probably should pray about that. If you had enough faith, your arm would stop being broken.
Right. Right. So you'd never say that to someone with a physical injury. So if we view mental health as the same as physical health. Yeah. How should you respond whenever a church starts giving that idea that you need to have more faith or pray more? How would you respond?
I'm not sure I would address it in the moment if I was hearing that from a church or from leadership, but it would be something that I would tuck in the back of my mind to think about more and to notice if this was a pattern or if it was just one specific person that happened to say something. But it would definitely keep my interest and I would keep paying attention to it.
Flag number 6 is perfectionism. Is a culture of perfectionism where members feel nothing they do is ever good enough a red flag for emotional abuse?
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're in a place where you feel like nothing you ever do is good enough, that's an awful place to be. That's not the community. And the manipulation that can go along with that could be really, really dangerous.
What is a practical first step that someone could take to set a boundary with an unhealthy church leader?
I think a really important first step is to be in community somewhere else. So if you have a really well-established community that feels safe and good to be in outside of the church situation that you're in that might not be healthy, it's going to be a lot easier to back away. It's going to be a lot easier too to see the red flags and to be able to make choices that are good for you.
Yeah, so seek out healthy community.
Once that's established, the next steps will be a lot easier.
Yeah. Would you say you should address the church leader?
I think it depends on your relationship with the church leader. If you feel the person is a narcissist, they're not going to hear it anyway. And so it doesn't make sense to address that leadership. If the person might hear it, it might be worth it. I would say most of the time, probably not. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with you. Probably not. It's interesting that that person probably has a body of believers or Christians that are maybe ignoring the red flags or going along with it. And that can feel really isolating when you're the person that acknowledges those red flags.
Yes, and with narcissists, I've heard of those people called flying monkeys, people that are surrounding the narcissist and lifting them up, believing in them, following their every whim. And that can be really disorienting. Like you said, when you're the only one and setting the boundaries, and that's seen as really bad and really,
Yes.
there's something wrong with you because you're pointing out red flags.
Right. So that's why having a community, healthy community to go to first is so beneficial. So you're not crazy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And you can get your needs met elsewhere. My guess is with those flying monkeys that they don't have a place to get their needs met, or they don't even know what it feels like to have their needs met. And this is the closest that they've gotten.
What is your final piece of advice for finding a genuinely safe, healthy community after leaving an unsafe one?
Well, I think the first and maybe most difficult step is to try again.
Yeah.
It's going to feel difficult and clunky after leaving an unsafe place because of all the really natural fears coming up in somebody. I'm thinking about things to be looking for in a community as you enter it. I think for me, humility is really important. Knowing that the people in leadership have genuine humility, can see their flaws in themselves, and are working for the good of the congregation or the community.
Yeah.
How about for you? What do you look for in a...
You can immediately tell whenever a church body is well connected in a healthy way, not in a toxic way. Yeah, when you're welcomed and it's genuine and there's follow-up. When people know you.
Yeah.
Stepping into a church body.
Yep.
Yeah. How would you address the fears from the previous church? I think you could use them in a way to know what you're not looking for based off your past church experience, but how else would you use that hurt?
Yeah. Yeah, and that becomes really tricky, I think, because those things are really good information, but they also could be really heightened triggers, and triggers that are so heightened that they're assigning red flags where red flags don't belong. And I think healing through therapy is a great way to start that process of kind of unraveling what was unhealthy. Just being able to sit with a therapist and talk about what you're seeing in the new community could be helpful. I think having a safe community or having safe people around you can be a reality check as well. So if you have somebody safe with you who knows your experience and they can speak to the new situation, that can be a good thing.
Yeah. Maybe having someone help you distinguish what was church and what was God. Is this God's character, or have you attributed these things to God? Having a safe and trusted person help you through that thought process.
Yeah, and I think working through any previous trauma, any previous emotional difficulties that maybe even led to being a part of an emotionally abusive church or community. Oftentimes, when we end up in spaces like that, we can see familiarities with what we've gone through in the past. And so we as human beings tend to repeat those hurts over and over again. And so being able to go back and deal with what the original issue was, maybe childhood trauma or things that happened with family members, can help people get healthy enough to make really good choices for their next community.
How long would you say it takes to find a healthy church community?
Yeah, I always tell people when they're looking for a good therapist to shop around, to visit a few therapists, and I think the same thing about churches. I think asking around, going to a few different churches, not settling on one just because you showed up and you happen to be there and it's comfortable because you've already been there once or twice.
Yes.
But making it intentional, I think, is helpful.
What about for people who were really involved in their church that caused the hurt? When would you say is a good time to get re-involved in a new church? Is there a good time?
I would say getting involved in a new church is great. But at first only relationally. I would say waiting a good period of time before jumping into service, just to allow yourself time to heal.
Yeah, to be filled for a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me about church red flags.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.